what's up guys, welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, welcome to our little corner of the internet. Today we're going to be watching a video titled SEAL Team 6 Smoked These Pirates, Jessica Buchanan Hostage Rescue, which I've seen the story of Jessica before on this channel, but I think this goes deeper into how the SEAL Team 6 operated during this. So without further ado, let's see what this video is about.
The Navy SEALs clenched their fists as they heard Jessica Buchanan desperately pleading for her life. The American teacher had participated in a demining project in Somalia before being kidnapped by several pirates. Now she lay sick and starving somewhere in the desert, defenseless against the whims of her heavily armed captors. The operators of the famous SEAL Team 6 would do everything to save her. But one bad piece of news followed the next. Gale force winds would force the sailors to jump out of the aircraft at more than twice the wind speeds of what would have normally canceled the jump. On top of that, they were in the middle of a solar storm, which could block radio communications to support units for hours. The SEALs would have to prove that—
I remember from my first reaction that they wanted to negotiate by America paying for them to release her, and I made the mistake in the video to ask why they didn't pay. Now I understand, because you guys made it very clear. We do not negotiate, or you guys do not negotiate with terrorists. You don't do that. So yeah, I just wanted to tell you all, if you've seen that video, I have learned my lesson.
that they were among the best before they even touched the ground. Any other mission would have been delayed by at least a day. But the warriors knew Jessica didn't have those 24 hours. And so they donned their parachutes, checked their oxygen tanks, and then jumped into the unknown darkness, and one of the most daring hostage rescues ever. Jessica Buchanan was 32 years old and living with her husband in one of the safer areas of Somalia. Together with her Danish colleague, Paul Thisted, she worked for a large aid organization, educating children about the dangers of anti-personnel mines that were widespread throughout the country. On her next assignment, she had to travel dangerously close to the so-called Green Line, an invisible line behind which lay the areas controlled by Islamists. The security situation in the Horn of Africa was already tense as it was, with bomb attacks and small skirmishes between rival tribes occurring almost regularly. However, Jessica had not come to Africa to hide behind walls, so she decided to conduct the anti-mine training anyway. At first, everything seemed to go without incident. But on October 25, 2011, the day of their return trip, everything was about to change for the two humanitarian workers. The first thing that struck Jessica as suspicious was her driver. Instead of their usual chauffeur, a completely unknown man was sitting in the Land Cruiser who was supposed to take them to the airport. Her Danish colleague, however, seemed to be in a hurry.
If it's not their usual chauffeur, did the chauffeur know what's gonna happen to them? Like, was this planned? I mean, obviously it was probably planned, but I mean, like, was it planned? Like, did even people they knew know that that's gonna happen? Because that's horrifying.
And climbed into the passenger seat unimpressed, which is why Jessica stopped worrying. Then, after only 10 minutes of driving, it happened. A massive car forced the convoy to an abrupt halt. Nearly 30 men with AK-47 assault rifles jumped out of several vehicles, banging on the Land Cruiser's windows and yelling orders in a language Jessica didn't understand. Before she could even realize what was happening to her, one of the pirates pointed his gun to her head while her security advisor was violently dragged from the vehicle. A heavily armed man sat down in the vacant seat and gave orders to Jessica's driver, who willingly hit the gas and showed who he was really working for. It wasn't long before they stopped again and switched vehicles amid loud shouting from the pirates. The whole thing seemed very well planned, although the kidnappers had obviously consumed too much khat, a plant common in Africa which acts similar to amphetamines. After the pirates stopped in the middle of nowhere, Jessica and Paul had to prepare their own execution, only to be sent back.
I think this also makes it even scarier to have people who are like mentally unstable and on drugs basically around you, who have kidnapped you and you have no idea like how they're gonna act or what they're gonna do is horrifying.
Back to the car just before their tragic end. The pirates didn't care at all about the lives of the relief workers, but in order to collect the highest possible ransom, they needed their hostages unharmed. For them, it was fun to mock the powerlessness of the West on the other side of the world. Jessica and Paul, meanwhile, were living their nightmare. They could do nothing, as they were at the mercy of the barbarians and didn't even know if anyone had noticed their disappearance. But Washington was not only aware of the abduction of the humanitarian workers, it had already initiated first countermeasures. Jessica's aid organization had notified the American embassy in Nairobi immediately after the assault, which in turn informed the FBI. From here, phone calls were made to family members to reassure them and dissuade them from acting rashly. Even before the end of the day, high-ranking officials briefed U.S. President Barack Obama, and while the pirates were preparing to contact authorities, Jessica Buchanan was already a top priority at the White House. Paul Fisted later recounted that the best thing that could have happened to him was to be kidnapped with an American. Both hostages and pirates were soon to find out what that meant. Almost 3 months later, Jessica was still in captivity. Good news was that she was still alive. Bad news was that despite slow negotiations, no agreement could be made for a ransom, as the pirates had even refused $1.5 million, enough money that each of them would be set up for at least 30.
What? They refused the money? Were they offered money? What? That's not what I heard.
Years. Every day, Jessica fought hunger, heat, and the constant fear that the kidnappers would harm her. As if all of that wasn't bad enough, a urinary tract infection had spread through her body, and in the worst-case scenario, it could be fatal. In a final video message to Western authorities, she joined Paul in begging for their lives and a quick payment of the ransom. Otherwise, she would either die from her infection or fall victim to the whims of pirates drugged with khat. That night, Jessica gazed up at the brightly lit starry sky and prayed. Unbeknownst to her, her prayers were answered when 10,000 miles away, 24 cell phones suddenly rang. The men picking up the phones had long beards and were covered with tattoos. Some of them had the stature of a bear, while others looked like hardened marathon runners. But they all had one thing in common: their aura of absolute calm, self-confidence, and professionalism. They were all part of the famous SEAL Team 6, who had just been alerted for a hostage rescue. Over the next few weeks, SEAL Team 6's Blue Squadron trained day and night to rescue Jessica, her pleading voice from the video message always in the back of their minds. The warriors had hunted gruesome men all over the world, but when it came to the lives of women and children, they were especially motivated. On January 25, 2012, the time had finally come. President Obama himself had given the green light for the hostage rescue. 24 of the best warriors the U.S. had to offer would risk their lives to try to free both hostages unharmed. Their plan was to parachute over Somalia and then approach the pirate camp on foot so as not to alert the enemy with loud noises. At the U.S. operations base in Djibouti, around 500 miles from Jessica's location, everything military-related which was useful in some way was gathered. At this point, the total operation cost was already well over $100 million.
Wow.
That was how much America was willing to spend to save just one citizen. With final preparations completed, the SEALs boarded their C-130 transport aircraft and took off for Mogadishu. Remarkably, the pilots themselves had only just arrived and had been on a 9-hour flight right before, but performed their job just like business as usual. All eyes, including those of the president, who was monitoring the operation via live feed, were now on the hostage rescue. As it turned out later, the kidnappers wanted to change their position on exactly this night, but had eaten spoiled meat and therefore ended up staying put. On the other side,
Were they watching it live from the White House?
however, a violent solar storm
Was this on the news at the time it was happening as well, or did they keep it secret until the operation was done?
erupted, which hit the Earth's magnetic field so hard that radio waves, and thus radio communications with other support units, were disrupted. Meaning, in a worst-case scenario, no quick reaction force, no situation reports, and no close air support. On top of that, wind speeds were more than double what would have canceled a regular mission. But the rescue of Jessica Buchanan was not a regular mission, and every one of the 24 men on board was willing to take that extra risk. After about 3 hours in the air, the C-130 had reached their drop point. The SEALs rose from their seats, hooked up their oxygen tanks, and then dropped from more than 20,000 feet into the 40-knot wind. After only a few seconds of free fall, the operators had already reached 120 miles per hour, a speed which is normally achieved by competitive athletes in optimal conditions. Despite the absurd wind situation, the SEALs managed to land semi-cohesively, with a few runaways who were dragged across the savannah for hundreds of yards before separating from the parachute.
Oof.
Holding security for each other, the sailors put on their combat gear and wrapped up their chutes. From now on, they had to walk several miles through the more than 100-degree hot Somali night. After nearly an hour of silent marching, the sailors reached their last cover before...
Oh, must have been so uncomfortable for the hostages to be there, just in general, for so long. But wow, it's just, I don't think there's many other countries that would do all of this, you know? I highly doubt.
Irreversibly committing to the assault. They were now only 500 meters from the pirate camp. Along the way, they had changed direction several times to always have the wind in their faces, eliminating any possibility of being spotted early. Every little detail counted when it came to sneaking as close as possible to the enemy. A hostage rescue differs from normal combat mission in that the hostage's life is even more important than fighting the enemy. The SEALs would literally run through machine gun fire if it meant they could save Jessica. Their goal was to remain undetected for as long as possible, then speed was of the essence. As the 24 warriors began to move again, the longest hour of their lives was about to begin. They had long been within earshot of the pirates, and only night's darkness kept them from the attention of enemy guards. As if in slow motion, one foot was silently placed forward, the weight shifted, and only then followed the next foot. An experienced SEAL named Justin Sheffield led the group. At his hand signal, the operators spread out far to the left and right to bring as many rifles forward as possible without walking into others' field of fire. Snipers positioned themselves on the outer flanks and monitored their comrades' actions. As the sailors moved forward in perfect unison, they could watch through their thermal scopes as the enemy sentries slowly became anxious and woke the other pirates.
Oh.
The SEALs quickened their pace, still perfectly steady. Sheffield aimed his laser at one of the Somali guards, and without having to say anything, his comrades did the same. The infrared beam was completely invisible to the pirates without night vision, but they sensed something moving in the darkness. With a loud clack, they racked their heavy PKM machine guns and got into position. The pirates pointed their weapons roughly in the direction from which they heard the sounds. The SEALs increased their pace once again, now less concerned with noise discipline than with closing the distance to the hostages before all hell broke loose. With a deafening noise, the pirates' machine gun kicked off and fired deadly 7.62 millimeter rounds at the operators, followed by several AK-47 assault rifles.
I feel like either it wasn't explained in the other video or I forgot this part because
The snipers had been waiting for just this moment and almost immediately silenced the enemy machine guns before seeking new targets. With surgical precision, the Navy SEALs returned fire while simultaneously fighting their way forward to find Jessica. In a similar hostage rescue, French special forces failed to overwhelm the hostiles quickly enough, resulting in the execution of the hostage. each of the SEALs was prepared to do anything to avoid just that. The hundreds of hours on the shooting range under simulated stress conditions paid off when they spotted two pirates with AKs standing right over Jessica, who was crouched on the ground. Sheffield and another SEAL broke away from the formation and both made sure these pirates never kidnapped anyone again with accurate shots. When Sheffield saw the American's bright face, he dove on top of her in the ongoing firefight, shielding her from the enemy crossfire with his own body. More SEALs joined in, and within seconds, the teacher was protected by multiple layers of the world's best warriors. Although the operators themselves all had wives and children, they put the hostage's life above their own. Meanwhile, another comrade had taken care of Paul Thisted, protecting him from enemy fire as well. After all 9 pirates were neutralized and the gunfire stopped, Sheffield put Jessica on his shoulders and sprinted out of the pirate camp as far away from any danger as possible. The other SEALs formed a human shield around the two, ready to resume the fight at any moment. After running as far...
I'm getting nervous just by listening to this, but it's just incredible how... It's just incredible. I mean, there's no words to explain this, at least. Like, I don't know. It's like overwhelming how good they are, you know? Like, I don't know how to explain it. I don't know what I was saying.
As his feet would carry him after this energy-sapping battle, Sheffield dropped Jessica off. Pararescue jumpers, the U.S. Air Force's specialized rescue force, tended to the American woman, who still couldn't believe she had just been rescued by her countrymen. As she anxiously asked, "What if more come? More could come." Sheffield coldly replied, "We are SEAL Team 6. We will kill anyone who tries to harm you now." She was visibly reassured by that convincing answer of the bearded warrior who had just rescued her from the worst situation of her life. After the SEALs blew up the pirates' arms depot, they still had to march to the landing zone of the Exfiltration helicopter. Whenever a suspicious noise was heard somewhere, or reports of enemies came in over the radio, it took only a few seconds for Jessica to find herself under a layer of Navy SEALs trying to protect her with their own bodies. Fortunately, however, there was no more fighting, and the American, accompanied by the SEALs, ran independently to the Black Hawk that would fly her to freedom. Behind her lay 3 months of captivity among heavily armed pirates, during which she could never be sure that she would live to see the next day. The selfless efforts of the men of SEAL Team 6 had finally saved her. As she reflected on the last few months, one of the soldiers on board knelt beside Jessica, looked her in the eye, handed her a beautifully folded American flag, and said, "Welcome home, Jessica." For those who have made it this far, thanks for watching. If you want to support our work, feel free to leave a like and tell us what you think of the hostage rescue. Should the U.S. government have simply transferred enough ransom so that the hostages were released peacefully? Or was the deployment of SEAL Team 6 just the right thing to do, in keeping with the motto, "We do not negotiate with terrorists"? Whatever you think, we're eager to hear your opinions. Thanks also to Justin Sheffield, whose book contributed greatly to this video. You'll find the link in the video description. Trust us, it's a great read. See you next time.
Well, that was a very insightful video, especially to see like the other side of the story, since like I think the other video talked more about what she was going through. But yeah, guys, what do you think? I think you don't have to fix what's not broken or something like that, you know? I think it was executed with perfection. It's worked, and I think everybody was safe afterwards, and that's what matters. So yeah, and yeah, we do not negotiate with terrorists, okay? No, we don't do that. Thank you guys for joining me for this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. Please leave a like, subscribe if you haven't yet, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.